Viking Horde did a document on HyperFarming, I think it was last week, and that has been uploaded to the Line app, so I would encourage you all to have a look in the notes section within the Line app group that we have for the clan, because not only is that document there, but there's other important things, because as time goes on we forget different bits and pieces, and they're quite good within the notes section to be able to go back and review them. This video is about HyperFarming, and I'm essentially just using Viking Horde's document and just running through it, because some of us are visual learners, some of us are readers. It really just depends. Me personally, I'm a visual learner. I like to see things so that I can understand it a little bit easier. So hopefully this will help, and it's just really to complement Viking Horde's document. So in the document, obviously he's talking about HyperFarming, which essentially is a way to help support the whole clan. As you know, as the clan gets bigger, we are going to require different types of resource, and as we start to grow more, once you start to get beyond sort of level 25, the cost to upgrade your knowledge or your buildings really grows exponentially with regards to the resource requirement. So you know, some of the earlier levels you didn't require a lot of resource. It doesn't matter how good a farmer you are, or how good if you already have a hyper farm set up, you are always, as a clan, we're always going to need more resource. So the document that Viking Horde has put together is essentially talking about hyper-farming to support the whole clan. So when you decide to hyper-farm, you need to dedicate your farm to a single resource. So to set up your hyper-farm, you need to dedicate that account to a single resource. And also, in addition, you can be farming silver as well. You can be growing your silver resource, because silver is really important as well, and we're constantly running out of silver. So the easiest way to build your hyper farm is either to establish a new town, or if you don't want to manage more than one account, you can accomplish the same goal essentially by converting some of your town buildings to one resource. So if we looked at mine at the moment, so on the right hand side of the town is where you have most of your resources. So this would be farms, quarries, mines, lumber mills. So I think over in here I have, let's have a look, what's this one? So this one is a farm. It's at a level 25, and you can see here, if I wanted to upgrade that to level 26, it's requiring a huge amount of resource, essentially just over 6 million of lumber, iron and stone. If I close that one, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and I think this is an 8th down there. And I think this one here is one as well. So I have about 9 food farms, and lesser amount of iron and stone. I have another account that essentially does stone for me. But if I wanted to change the way that my town is set up, so that I perhaps wanted it to provide food only to me, I would demolish these other ones. So if I click on this one, and you hear this one's a mine, it's level 23, I could click demolish, and what that would then do is, if I press demolish, I'll let you see where it'll do. So when I click demolish, you can either choose to destroy it instantly, which I have these torch items, so I've got 66 of them. So if I pressed apply, that would demolish that right away. And this one here, you can, if you don't have any torches, you can choose dismantle, and when you do that, it tells you here how long that's going to take to dismantle it. So it's going to take 3 weeks and 3 days. Now initially, if you choose to destroy or dismantle, you will lose some influence as you destroy it, because some of your influence level is contributed to by the buildings in your town. It's not a huge amount, but if you're knocking, you know, 5 or 6 buildings, demolishing them, you will find that you maybe lose a few million in resource initially. But when you rebuild, whether you're maybe swapping it out as a lumber mill to a farm, as you rebuild that and then upgrade those buildings, you will then find that your influence will start to creep back up again. So don't be alarmed if you lose some influence right away. I'm not going to destroy this because I'm quite happy with the way my town's set at the moment, but that's essentially what you would do. You would remove the ones that you no longer want and rebuild with the resource that you want to focus on. Now, ultimately, you're going to think, okay, so if I'm producing food all the time, how am I then going to get iron, or how am I going to get stone or silver, etc.? The deal here is that if you're changing your town into a hyper farm, as you know, we have a bank now. So you would then send resource to the bank. When you require other resource, you ask the bank, or you ask any of your fellow clan members, because ultimately somebody is going to have the resource that you're looking for, and vice versa. It's an easier way for us to be able to maximise each of our own towns and focus our knowledge around that. And that's essentially what the document that Vikinghorp was talking about is. Not only is it to do with the buildings that you have, but you also have to focus your knowledge on that resource. So if we go and look at the knowledge that I have, as you know, if we go and look in the Oracle, and if you look in the knowledge, you can see here, as you know, we've previously talked about these, that you've got the different knowledge types. The one that you want to focus on for your hyper farm is your economics. So you can see here I've got 121 of 300. If we click on that, your goal here is to reach the bottom of the economic tree. So if we go all the way down, to be able to make your farms or your hyper farm the best that it can be, you want to be getting all the way down to the bottom here. So here the final one is silver production number 2, which I am nowhere near. Vikinghorp, he is the hyper farming expert, so he will be pretty far down this tree. If you see, I'm down here a little bit, but the most important thing is, if you look at mine, because I'm not set up for hyper farming, I've spread my knowledge pretty much across most of the things, all the way down. So if you look at the top of the tree, you will see that I've got these all maxed 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. But if you're only focusing on, say you're focusing on lumber, you would have this to number 10, and then these ones to the minimum amount that's required for you to be able to get down to this next level. So you understand what that means, that you have to have some of these to a minimum amount before you can unlock these ones. But you would only do those ones to the minimum amount that's required. You wouldn't max them out like I have done here. So woodworking, if I'm focusing on lumber, I would have this to 10, and if it was only required for these to be to level 1, that's all I would have done for these. And then I would come down and look for the next one that I need to get to for lumber. Come all the way down. Now, if you look in here as well, the capacity one and your fleetness one are important ones as well. I've got these maxed out here just now because if we click on capacity, this is about how when you're looting or doing or if you're farming, etc. This is about how much your troops can carry back. So again, I like to make sure that I'm maximising the effort that I'm putting into farming, or if I'm looting somebody. So I've maxed these out as well. It's personal choice on what you want to do. Now here's your convoy capacity. I've got that to level 6 at the moment. So the convoy capacity is about how much you can send resource wise. So here you can see the number of resources in a convoy. You know, if I do the next upgrade, I'm going to get an extra 12% on top of what I can already send. But you can see here how much resource that's going to take. Now that's basic amount of resource. That's not any boosts or my my development hero set activated. That's just, you know, off the back how much it costs. I can get that reduction down quite a bit. So here, if we were just talking, here's lumber supply 1. So again, if you were focusing on wood, you would make sure that you've got this to the maximum and these ones here just to the bare minimum that's required, again, to take you down to the next level. And again, you would just be focusing all on the lumber. Now, if you've got you know, extra time, etc., you would go back. So here I've got woodworking number 2. But once you get to the maximum of all the bits that you want, go back then and backfill some of these as well. But your focus should be on the resource that you're looking for, and also on silver, because in Viking Horde's document he's talking about that you should also be focusing on silver. We need a lot of silver when we're doing our bills. I mean, look here, it's 190 million silver. So not only are you focusing on one resource, but you're also focusing on the silver. Once you have your towns above level 23, so if we look at these buildings, so if you have your palace above level 23, and your farms or your quarries, etc., whichever one you're focusing on, once these are above level 23, that is when you start maximizing the amount that you're actually producing. So the aim of the game is not to have lots of farms sitting at level 10. You want to be able to progress them quickly and get them above level 23, because once they're above that, the higher levels will greatly increase the resource and the amount of silver that you're producing. So if I go over on the left hand side, what I have started to do is, because I'm not producing enough silver, I find personally that the infirmaries aren't hugely helpful to me. I think I had about 6 infirmaries. I've started demolishing some, and I'll probably keep only 2 or 3. And the reason for that is that I find, as we know, to resurrect troops is really, really expensive, and I would just rather rebuild them. Sometimes we can be lucky, and some of them will go to heal, but I don't need 6 infirmaries for that. So I'm just going to keep a couple, and I've started destroying others. So now what I have is quite a number of manors, and those are important for the silver production. So if I have a look at this one, so we can see here it tells you what the silver production is, and if I go to the next level, how much more silver I will produce, and it also shows you here how much silver capacity. Now this is important, because once there's this amount of silver available, unless I dump that to the bank, it's not going to produce any more silver, which is why you see Viking Horde dumping every 2 hours from his farm accounts. So his food, his stone, his lumber, he is constantly feeding either the bank or the stronghold, because once you're at the full capacity, your farm will no longer produce. In addition to maximising all your resource to one particular type and your additional manors for silver, you can't just leave them sitting there, or else they're not going to produce any more. What you have to do is be regularly dumping them. Now obviously it's quite a commitment to dump every 2 hours, and Viking Horde is obviously very dedicated to that. It's just to remember to try and dump as and when you can, because as soon as you dump that, your buildings will then start to produce more, and that's obviously important. And if you're stocking the bank, and there's going to be a document that's going to come out soon, and there'll probably be a video that'll talk around that as well. But then the more that you're providing the bank, the more you will be able to draw down. So if you need other types of resources, or if you've got a big build coming up, as long as you've been helping stock the bank and you've been stocking the stronghold, you will be able to draw down a fair amount from the bank. To help you continue to grow, because by you helping the clan, we're all helping each other. So as always, the way with things is that you can use hero gear to be able to maximise the amount that you're producing to an extent for your silver, and you can also have some special gear from the Stronghold, which can help you get some bigger boosts around the build time for your new buildings if you're demolishing and having to recreate some. So if I have a quick look within the hero sets on that, the document that Viking Horde is talking about, the gear is, if I switch my hero set to development at the moment, okay, so if we go back, you can see the various pieces of equipment that I have on here. So Viking Horde's gear, he's talking about standard gear for building, so enable to be able to get some boosts for creating your building. The standard weapon that's available is the Vanquisher's Blade, and the amulet is Victor's Bracelet. However, there has recently been some special equipment made available from within the Stronghold. If you look at this one, this is Olaf's seal. It has a 45% increase on the learning speed and 25.8% on the training speed, and you can see as well that there's a 90% on the silver production and 180% on the food production. Now, these will only come into play when that hero set is activated. Just having that piece of equipment isn't enough. You have to remember to, you know, if you're maybe going to be offline for, I don't know, 24 hours or whatever, you're going to pick your hero set based on what you want to achieve within those 24 hours. So if you wanted an increase on your silver production, or you were building during that period of time, or you know, whatever, you have to plan these things in order to be able to get the most out of your gear and the boosts that you have available to yourself. So if I was working on a building, if I was destroying a building and redoing one, I would swap Olaf's seal for another item that I have from the Stronghold, which is, let me find it, this one here. This one's just recently been made available, and that's Bjorn's Goblet. And here you can see, based on the actual piece of special equipment itself and the gems that I've inserted into that inlay, I'm getting a building speed of 66%. And on top of that as well, you know, there's a small increase in the lumber production and the stone production, which I'm not overly concerned about. But for me, that building speed, so I have two of those, so I would swap that out and I would change it here, and I would also take the other one off and put the other goblet on as well. Let me have a quick look. Because of the length of time it takes to get the different pieces of equipment, it's entirely up to yourself. But if you're changing your current account and you're probably already, you know, above level 20, you probably already have some of the gems, and you already have some of the materials. So for me, my advice would be to focus then your energy and your resources, etc., on achieving the special equipment, because the length of time it takes you to get some of the standard equipment is, you know, it could be round about the same. So for your main account, if you're amending different things, I would focus on the special equipment. If you're just going to start a new account, so like the Black Isle is one of my new accounts, I have very little materials and very little gems, and I'm not investing a huge amount of my time on it. I would then use the standard equipment that Viking Horde is talking about. So for buildings, it's Vanquisher's Blade and Victor's Bracelet. It would take me too long to be able to achieve to get the special equipment. So I'm using the special equipment, and I focus on building that on my main account. And for any sort of farm accounts that I may have, I would then just focus on the standard gear, because it's going to take you a long time to be able to achieve those materials. So now if I was to do a building, I've got two items that are giving me 66% increase on my building speed, and you know, it was said before, that's not to be sneezed at. In addition to that, I would also then run my run a boost. So if I leave those sitting there before I started the building, so I've made sure that my hero has got the right gear on, and I'm using, oh for crying out loud. So you can build the other items that Viking Horde is talking about if you're starting on new accounts, or if you're already using the ones that you want, your main account. You can either choose the special equipment, check that out first, as I've said, or you can build the standard equipment. Essentially all you're doing is you're just going into equipment and looking for the items that Viking Horde was talking about. So if I go into equipment, and he's saying helmets, standard equipment, so he's saying the helmet should be the Vanquishers. So if we scroll down here and have a look, oop. There, it's there. So if we have a look at that, so you can see the different increases in silver production based on the type of helmet that you have. Ultimately, if you're going to the effort of creating the equipment, try and make sure that you're getting the legendary, because it's worth it. Because if you look, there's a 144% increase on the amount of silver that you can produce just on that helmet, and it doesn't take that long to create it. So if I press create, that will go away. It takes an hour. I can boost it if I want, or I can use the gold to create it. The other item he's talking about is in the armor, the standard Jarl's mantle. Have a wee look. There, it's there. Jarl's mantle, nice wee blue jacket, and again, the silver production is going to jump up to 90% if I made sure that I had both of these legendary items as well, which is cotton. 90%, and then you're also getting other increases on the other items as well. So basically just work through. He's saying Vanquisher's helmet, Jarl's mantle, silver bow, silver greaves, and gilded bracers. And you can get a lot of these materials obviously either from the chest of Loki or clearing tasks, as well as if you're farming resources in the kingdom. One of the other sneaky things that I found out when I'm doing farming is that if you actually look when you're using, let me show you. Okay, so if I look for, let's just say I'm looking for food. So I'm gonna farm for some food. One of the sneaky things about this is when you farm a resource. See these ones here, they're 1.2 million. That's, you know, that's fine if you've got all day to sit and farm, and you know that you can farm. And when you empty that layer, essentially you get an item. Like a piece of material, and sometimes you can be lucky and get a gem. What I find is if you look for ones that have got a lower amount in them, so like this one's only got 562k in them, there's 479, I pick those ones first, and the reason for that is you drain it quicker, and you're also getting more bonus items, more bits of material, more bits. So this one here, 373, you know, you could probably drain that in 10 minutes if you put a reasonable amount of troops on that, and then go and find another one that's small, and it's a quicker way to be able to build up your gems and your materials. I found that out from one of the videos, I think it was that Chief shared with me. It was just a YouTube video, I think. So you can do the same with all of the different resources. Look at this one, 164k. I'd be on that like a ninja, because I can farm it really quickly, and I'll probably get a couple of bonus items as well. So pick your layers that you're farming really carefully as well, rather than just sitting for too long on a 1.2 million, because essentially I could probably farm 4 or 5 of these and get more with regards to materials and gems than I would farming 1.2 million one. So I've digressed a little bit. The hero skill points as well, are really important as well. So not only are you making sure that your building is to maximum level, your knowledge on the resource and your silver that you're specialising in is to the maximum that you can get it to be at that time, but also your hero points should be focused on the resource, and you want to make sure those are down the right hand side of the tree, so you're always applying the minimum to move down the tree until you reach the silver. So if we look at my silver, let me go back into my town. Now my Black Isle, my Black Isle account is slightly different because it is predominantly only a farm, but the hero points, if we look at the hero skills, what you want to be focusing on for your hyper farming is making sure that you have all the ones for silver maximised. So if we scroll back up, you see this is my development hero set, so that's why all my stuff is down the right hand side here, but it is mostly geared around you know, my buildings, my training and my knowledge. If I wanted to, I could set a complete hero set up just for hyper farming, and you know that is the way that my Black Isle account is set up. But this one, because I use it for multiple purposes, it's not quite as good as it should be. But here you can see here the silver production. So ultimately, rather than put my hero points that I've got further down, I would have this maxed out to 50. And if it was wood that we were talking about, the production, I would have this maxed out as well. I would have my hero points on that. So it's your building, it's your knowledge, it's your hero skill points, and it's also the gear that you're wearing. And before you know it, you will radically increase the different quantity of resource that you're actually producing. One of the things that is really obvious, well, yeah, I'm going to laugh about it because actually it wasn't so obvious to me. For the Black Isle account, I decided that I was going to set that up as a hyper farm, so it is really just it produces stone for me. But in addition, I thought I would be a bit of a smart aleck, and I decided I was going to create a lot of killer troops and start working on building killer troops for there. But initially, before I decided that it was going to be stone, I had started building it as a food farm, and because I was building troops here as well, it's not rocket science, but the troops then were eating the food, which meant that the food that I was producing was literally just feeding my troops. So if you're going to set up a farm for food, there's no point putting troops in there. Absolutely no point, because they'll just eat they'll just eat it. It's different if it's stone, etc. So that was why I changed Black Isle to stone. But the other thing as well is then I only have one farm for food. And it means then that my food up here is always in the red. Now, because it's a farm account, it doesn't bother me. I'm fine with it being in red. And when I need to, you know, have resource food quickly, I can ask the bank to give me food, and then I'll do my knowledge increase or my building increase right away, or else the troops will eat the food. But on my main account, I don't have, well, I've got a few farms here, but I know for a fact that I don't have enough food to keep this out of the red. So I do, we've talked about this, but I do, there's a 75%, I think it's a resource boost that keeps this out of red for me. But for your farm accounts, you're not going to worry about that. There's no point spending gold on doing that. So just bear that in mind, that if you're making it a food resource, your troops are going to eat the food. So there's two key things that are really important once we've figured out obviously our building, our hero points, our knowledge, etc., and making sure we've got all the hero gear and our boosts and everything all running. The two key important things that we need to have, first of all, you need to make sure you have a shield. If you've got a dedicated farm account, so like Black Isle, that needs to have a shield on it. Preferably make sure that you're putting the longest shield that you've got available on it. When you've got gold coming into that account, and make sure that you're shielding that for as long a period of time as you can, because if you forget about that, it's going to be costly, especially if you haven't dumped recently. You could be giving 20 million, 30 million at a time to enemy. So you need to make sure it's shielded, and that's why the bank will always be shielded, because it's always going to be holding quite a bit. The second most important thing as well is actually how much resource are you producing. So you need to set yourself a sort of target in your own head, and then work towards that. So if you go into your palace, there's a huge amount of information available within here. So if you go and look at the statistics, it's a tricky word. Here, there's all the tabs down this side. So you've got economic, you've got military, you've got hero, and you've got your influence. So if you look at your economic section, which is the default one when it comes up, it shows you here how much you're producing an hour. So here I'm producing 5.2 million an hour of food. The other resources are less, as I would expect, because I don't have many of those. And also I'm only producing 416,000 of silver. So as I said, I'm actually destroying some of my infirmaries and swapping them out for manors, so that I can increase the amount of silver that I'm producing as well. So this is where you get that sort of information as well. But also, if you drill down on this, so if we look at the food, here you can see where you're getting the different increases. So I've increased my food production by 820%. And it shows you the capacity of my farm. So once I got to 23 million, those farms won't produce anymore. So I have to dump that resource. To give you an idea, Viking Horde, most of his are producing more than 20 million an hour. And that is why he is having to dump every couple of hours. So you can see, if you look, you can see where you're getting the different increases from. So some of it's from equipment, some of it's from boosts that I've got running that we talked about in previous videos, and some of them are the hero skills, and some of them are the knowledge. So it all comes together quite nicely. So for an 820% boost, that's pretty good going. So make sure that you're checking in these constantly and making sure that you're maximising the resource that you want to be producing.